us in this room have either had a pet, or you have a pet now, or you plan on getting one in the future when you're older. You might get it at an animal shelter, or you might find it on the side of the road, or buy it at a pet store. But for $140, you can purchase them offline, soaked in formaldehyde and ready to be dissected in a classroom. I believe that animal dissections in public schools should be altogether terminated. Advances in technology make these processes outdated and obsolete. They are cost inefficient, they harm the environment, and they do not provide an equal learning opportunity for all students. So one problem with animal dissections is that they're very expensive. Carolina.com is a huge provider for the specimen used in these dissections, and they sell frogs, which are some of the most commonly dissected animals, for $7 each. So even if your class is small and only has 20 students in it, that's going to be $140 without any lab equipment purchase. On the same website, virtual lab videos are available for $90, and that covers the entire class. But better yet, the teacher can find free resources online that covers the same information. And no studies have shown any correlation between a learning disadvantage when using virtual as opposed to wet labs. The environment is also harmed by animal dissections. When most of these animals are taken from their natural habitats and killed, so, like frogs, they're both predator and prey, so when they're taken out of their homes, it affects two sides of the food chain, not just one. And it's not only the animals that are harmed, it could potentially be us as well. Formaldehyde is what's used to preserve these animals most of the time, and it is classified as a human carcinogen, meaning it poses a variety of threats to us as humans. But perhaps the biggest issue with these dissections is the fact that some students find them morally wrong, or just disturbing. Jody Whitaker of the Center for Ethical Science says, quote, "When a student objects to animal dissection, it's important to remember that they are not trying to opt out of learning. They simply want to learn without harming animals, and that should be taken seriously." And according to Neves.org, if a student participates in something they feel is ethically questionable, they could suffer from psychological trauma from that. In order to cope with what they're seeing and feeling, these sensitive students will begin to feel numb, and that leads to their learning skills to be dulled down. They're not going to learn as much as another student might in that class. This desensitizing also could lead students to feel that animals are not living things, but are rather just things that could be useful to them, just objects for their use, and that is a dangerous way for students to think. And again, it isn't all students that are even remotely bothered by these dissections, but the ones that are severely affected by them. So virtual labs, in my opinion, are a very simple solution to this problem. They're cost efficient, they do not harm the environment, and there are lots of free options available with the same information. Better yet, they're safer, and no environmental harm is going to be posed by virtual dissections. There are no dangerous chemicals involved, and there's an equal learning opportunity for all students, regardless of what their morals are. They don't have to do anything they don't feel comfortable with for a grade. I started researching this topic last year during my biology class when I was asked to do a virtual lab in preparation for an animal dissection. And I learned so much more from the internet than I did from the lab when I didn't feel okay enough to actually touch the specimen at all. As close as I got to it is when I was picking fish scales out of my lab partner's hair. So I think the teacher could have saved both time and money if she would have just stuck with the virtual lab dissection. I hope this has allowed you to see that animal dissections are ineffective, and the more practical solution would be virtual dissections. If you're uncomfortable dissecting an animal and you're asked to do so, I encourage you to talk to your teacher and ask for an alternative assignment. They should be willing to listen and hear you out. And odds are you're not uncomfortable dissecting an animal, and that's perfectly okay, but if another student around you seems uncomfortable, they probably are. They're probably suffering tremendously thinking about what they have to do to that animal. So encourage them to talk to the teacher. Let them know that they have other options. The replacement of animal dissections with these virtual labs might take some time and effort, but we can start by informing our schools of the problems that are associated with dissecting animals in classrooms. Before we know it, we'll have better ways to learn. Thank you.
Okay, I know like everybody doesn't like it, but if the the medical field like have to dissect things in order to know how to do it. So like if we get rid of regular dissections altogether, that kind of hinders them.
Yeah, I limited this speech to just public schools
Yeah.
because not all of us in here, you know, in a biology class or an anatomy class, you might be taking that because you need another credit, or they tell you it looks good on your resume or whatever. So a lot of us aren't going into the medical field, and the ones that are, you're going to learn that information in college or whatever you decide to do. They're going to specialize in that. It's just, if you know that's what you want to do, the odds are you're going to be less uncomfortable with it, and it makes sense, I think personally, to limit it to just the people who need to know that information.
You'd mentioned about like using virtual things, so as in like simulations with like our technology that we're given here at schools, so like more the schools that have like a one-to-one device policy would be more likely to switch over to a virtual lab sort of thing then.
Where do they get like the cats and stuff?
Sometimes they're taken from shelters if they're going to be euthanized, which obviously that's less of a problem, but there are a lot of animals that are just like taken from their habitats. That's where most of them come from, and then they're just preserved and sold.